And I tell you, the American people think that there are people down here that sing to their tune. Yeah. And in the House, we showed that that wasn't true. And
well, you showed that that's not true for the majority.
Right, for the majority. So I'm saying the House...
For everybody.
No, that's why the fight was for Barney. I mean, he had to get over those people who do dance to their piper. But we had the majority in the House and got it done. The problem is, I think everybody's perception is, do they really have enough people in the Senate? Because somehow they don't want to make the Constitution work. They don't need just 51 votes. They need 60, which is another absurdity in itself. But are there enough people that don't dance to that special interest over there?
You know, and that's you have put the question on the table. Now, the good news is, just last week, the Republicans offered a substitute consumer bill. And look, I'm just going to be blunt. I don't want to be partisan, but I'm just going to be blunt. It was just a pretend bill.
Well, Bill Moyers tells it right. The facts are ascertainable, so you don't have to be partisan. Right. Just tell the facts.
That's right. Those are the facts. So they were going to replace the entire idea of an independent, strong consumer agency that had at least the hope that it was going to be able to rein in these big credit card companies and mortgage lenders and payday lenders and title loan and so on. And they said, no, what we're going to do is we're actually just going to put a little department over in one of the regulatory agencies, and the banks will still effectively have a veto over what it does. And we're going to call that the consumer agency. And I want to give credit here. It was voted down, and it was voted down decisively, and was actually voted down with a little bit of bipartisanship on it. So at least that much is off the table. Now the big issue is, well, can they find amendments to knock a hole here and cut a piece there, and that's the fight we're having. It's
well, it wasn't helped when Mitch
combat.
McConnell went to New York and Wall Street, and John Boehner, our minority leader, went to New York in public, on public record, basically indicated we're going to go down and try to fight these things for you being the Wall Street banks.
Right.
Now, I don't know any of our local banks, that are fighting this. They may have nuances that they want to discuss or whatever, but our community banks, the depository banks or everything, they're not the ones to blame for the mess that we're in, and they're not the ones to blame for the fighting back against these agencies that are there. Most of them would welcome some good oversight and the separation out of them from the shenanigans that the others do, because too many people don't make that distinction, and it's difficult on them. So the fight waged on the Senate, there is some prospect that it may not be an independent consumer agency itself, that it may end up somewhere in the Fed. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Well, right now, it's in the Fed, the Senate bill.
The Senate bill.
Is in the Fed, but it has the indicia of independence. That is, it's independent rulemaking authority, it has independent enforcement authority, it has a head that will be appointed directly by the President, it has an independent budget. So let me put it this way. It's not my first choice.
Right.
I like the House version. House makes it independent, but let's always remember, Senate votes second, but now it'll go to conference, and we'll have Barney Frank in there on the House side, at least arguing, I hope successfully, for the places where the House bill is stronger to go with the House bill.
Is there any place in the Senate bill that you think it's actually stronger than the House bill?
Potentially. We're not there yet, but the derivatives part of the Senate bill may turn out to be stronger. I think our thinking has emerged over time. The House...
Tell people what derivatives are.
So this is about those fancy financial contracts. Remember, we have mortgages, ground level, somebody lends you money. They got packaged together by the finance folks.
Sometimes portions of them.
That's right, sliced and diced, sold in separate, they're called tranches, but sold in separate layers, repackaged, right? This was like hamburger meat that they kept cutting and recutting on down the line. And then they started trading in pieces of this. When that wasn't enough, they started trading in bets on what would happen to pieces of this. If this sounds really complicated, it's because it is. Then they started trading.
Complicated. You make that point well. They made it complicated.
And then they started trading in bets on bets about what would happen to those sliced up pieces of mortgages. Because the whole idea was lots of complication. Your buyer doesn't know exactly what's there. Shoot, it got to the point the seller didn't know what was there. But there was lots of money in trading that stuff around. It turned out that put the enormous risk into our system. Started at the household level, worked its way all the way up, and nearly brought us down.
So what does the House bill do, and how does the Senate potentially improve on that?
So the House bill starts to try to put its arms around derivatives, but it's hard. These are complicated. Nobody knows much about them. They haven't been on big public markets. And so
why don't we just ban them?
Well, I have to tell you. That's the real question. And no one's going that far right now. We're going to go as far as we can go right now. And the idea is the first step to get as many of them onto public markets where you can see them, where the people who are playing with them actually have to have some capital to back them up. That puts a little less craziness in the system, and that's the best way I can describe it. It's not that it makes the system 2 thumbs up, it's that it's a little less crazy system than it was. So, House got started in the right direction. Senate, with Blanche Lincoln's amendment, if this goes through, is going to push it a little farther, but we're not through on this one.
Coming back
I
to
really
visit it
hope
even
we're
after this
coming
law
back
passes.
again. But let's get this part through. This is good steps.
We have
Good
about
steps.
2.5 minutes left,
Okay.
and so much more to talk about. But the part that our Committee on Oversight has been working on, besides the AIG, which, the whole question about whether that was not bailed out by Congress or the President or anybody else, that was the Fed.
That's right.
They gave him $85 billion.
That's right.
And the former CEO of the company told me in answer to a question, he wouldn't have bailed them out. So that's always comforting to know. So there's the Fed, run amok on that basis. But somebody was looking at all of these derivatives that you were talking about and saying to investors, looks good to me,
Yeah.
we're putting our seal of approval on the rating companies.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to take those rating companies and no longer let them get paid by the people who are selling the product, as opposed to the people that are buying it or somebody general paying for it that has no interest?
The question you're asking is how do you put some honesty back into that part of the system,
Exactly.
right? And one way to do it is exactly as you say, who's actually going to be paying for it? The idea that I'm going to pay this guy to rate me, which guy do you think I'm going to pick? And they're competing for my business. I'm going to get AAAs, and so's everyone else out there.
And they did.
And they did, and that's exactly what happened. I want to remind you there are a lot of ways, though, to deal with those rating agencies. Another way is to say, you get out there and make representations that you can't back up on the real numbers, then maybe you should be liable. Maybe those who relied on you, like my pension fund, should be able to come back to the ratings agency and say, hey, listen, guys, if you can't document that was entirely on the up and up, then you have to be responsible. Everybody else who sells products in America has to stand behind them, except in financial services. Maybe that's what we have to fix. You've got to stand behind what you sell.
Well, as a good way to wrap this up, probably in my soapbox on this, there is a role for government. Oversight is one of them. Setting reasonable rules of the road, regulations is another. Whether it's oil companies that aren't being held responsible for leaking oil into, whether it's these banks on Wall Street that ran amok, you go right with that, whether it was the health insurance companies that were stopping people from getting health insurance. People are mad, but they focus their anger in the right places. What are we doing to make sure that we're all protected? You're doing a lot in that regard. We want to thank you very much. We could do another show for another hour, I feel, and maybe we'll have you back sometime if that's possible.
I'd like that.
Thank you for the public service you're doing for all of us, standing up for the taxpayer.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.